Apple and Qualcomm. I haven't had this topic in a while.
I know. I love talking about Apple and Qualcomm.
It's
I
a
really do.
really funny thing. I call them strange bedfellows. I don't know what else
Yeah.
to call it, but these are two companies that, well, in fairness, I mean, Qualcomm was essentially on defense for the better part of 5 years, from pretty much longer than five, but the five were very tenuous. Let's just put it that way, between the FTC, China, Korea, Japan, every other FTC on the planet going after them for their business model. Of course, you had the Huawei's and the Samsungs kind of piling on during that period of time. You had US regulators. You had Broadcom trying to acquire the company, and you had Apple basically deploying massive resources and propaganda campaigns to make it appear that Qualcomm was somehow trying to harm Apple's horribly sad 80-something% margins on their iPhones by selling them.
I feel so bad. I feel so bad for Apple.
Was it the $20 a phone that they have to pay for being able to use all of Qualcomm's intellectual property that they spend decades developing?
Yes.
Anyhow, Pat, you and I actually, this is a victory lap moment for you and I believe. I would like to call this out. I think you said it in your tweet. I just want to say it publicly right now. We said, I think when Apple successfully moved off of Intel, as M1 matured for their Macs, I think people thought this was a parallel to what was going to happen at Qualcomm. The street rated them down, basically thought that losing Apple's business was going to devastate the company. Meanwhile, Qualcomm has diversified its business. It's grown as the penultimate company in the premium chip space for Android devices. Android is growing. They're getting tons and tons of design wins, and at the same time diversifying into auto and IoT and into RF front end, and other new business ventures. Of course, still have their licensing unit, and now we're getting down to a single-digit dependence on Apple. If for some reason Apple was to pull away, but here's the thing: Apple can't leave. Because you and I called this out. The RF front-end 5G systems are too complicated. When they bought Intel's Infineon business unit, everybody thought, well, there it goes. But remember, Intel was having a horrid time trying to match the quality of the Qualcomm devices before 5G. And so they acquired this team for basically parts at the time. It was like, $1 billion, which in Apple world is like turn Tim Cook over and just dump the change out of his pockets. It was not a big acquisition. And the talent came in, has not so far been able to achieve what it's been able to achieve on the PC side or on the Mac side. So now it looks like Qualcomm is going to continue to be a strange bedfellow to Apple for at least another year. And that came out from a pretty well-known analyst that covers Apple very closely. I'd like to say the name is Ming-Chi Kuo. He's with TF International, and he basically said for all of the second half, it's likely Qualcomm's going to be doing 100% share. So this is a really good thing for Qualcomm. It got a little bump in the market, but of course the market sucks right now. So even great news doesn't make anybody particularly happy. So I'm going to end on kind of one thing and pass this over to you, Pat. But essentially, I think it's going to be longer than 23. This is my bet right now. And again, it's my opinion. I'm not putting it in written in stone. And I'm not, by the way, doubting that Apple can't spend money and get there. But there's so much complexity in doing 5G. Between all the relationships, the systems, the validations. I think Apple took on a little more than it could chew here, and its full vertical integration desires may end up taking a few even years longer than they think before they're going to be able to fully separate themselves from Qualcomm, if ever.
Yeah, I mean, we called it. 5G systems are difficult, and by a system, I mean the front end and the back end. How about that, Daniel? The digital and the analog side. And that's really what the game has become. And there are a lot of very strong analog folks like Skyworks out there and Broadcom and Qorvo. On the OEM side, though, it takes a little bit more time to integrate 5G because it's more complex in the way that it operates. So we called this, we were right. I mean, here's what I can't believe, though. It has been 3 years since Apple bought the Intel modem assets. Now, what I've heard back channel is they completely started over. They didn't leverage any of the designs, which, by the way, I find that hard to imagine because when you have a 5G system, you have to be backward compatible. And I highly doubt that they redid 4G, 3G, and 2G interaction. But it's hard. Modems what's the right way to say this? There's less people doing modems. I think there's 5 people left, and there's really only four analog folks out there for smartphones left. But how many CPU folks are there? There's a ton of them out there. So I'm going to say it. Modems are a lot harder than a CPU. And others might say, hey, but Apple has been doing all this stuff on Bluetooth and making Wi-Fi better. And they have. But here's the thing. That is a walk in the park compared to the 5G modem part. The biggest mind blower for me is, okay, 5G is hard. Put a low band data modem in your iPads, right, to start, right? It decomplicates the issue. My gosh, Intel had this functionality 3 years ago. Intel's challenge was millimeter wave, right? So they had this capability that many years ago. It could be also an integration challenge, which is, in the end, Apple needs to integrate 5G into the SoC itself. So I don't know exactly what the problem is, but this is an issue. There's only 3 companies that have been able to integrate 5G into their SoC, and Apple is not one of them, right? They have a separate modem and obviously all the RF that goes along with it. Now, bigger picture, it's funny, all this elation about Qualcomm and the stock. I mean, congratulations, but here's the thing. Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon is making his company Apple-proof and essentially baking into his financial and his commitments that Apple's maybe a 20% in the following year and then 0% after that. I think that's great, right? And I can imagine Tim Cook calling Cristiano saying, hey, are you not going to sell to us or something? Very, very, very interesting way to deal. But this is the way you have to deal with Apple. What did Broadcom do when Apple threatened to go to somebody else on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth? They put the entire unit on the block to sell. Do you remember that? Octan's a freaking genius when it comes to negotiation. That is hardball. Like, okay, Apple, you don't want to do a long-term agreement with me? I'm going to sell this thing. Okay? That is the way you have to deal with Apple. You cannot capitulate to Apple. Okay? All the vendors, all the suppliers of Apple's listening to this, you cannot capitulate. You have to bake in that they will steal your IP, steal your people, and try to put you in the grave. Look at Imagination. It's a shell of itself right now, right? I don't know if you remember, Daniel, Imagination was their core IP provider for graphics. Mm-hmm. Apple says, no, we're moving away from you. Imagination sues Apple, and then Imagination has to basically bend over and take one for the team and essentially give away free IP or cheap IP. So I'm going to leave you just one final comment, Daniel, and I know you've got a hot
Good
take.
Man, just keep rolling.
The Supreme Court decided to not listen to Apple's bid to revive the Qualcomm patent challenges. So
yeah, they lost bad.
It's dead. That is a dead thing, but I fully expect Apple to be in intellectual property terrorist mode when 6G comes out.